From a young age, I was fascinated by the power of words. When I first picked up a pen, everything else faded away, leaving just me and the paper. This passion grew as I got older, turning writing into a way to process my experiences and find meaning in life. Meeting Connie was transformative. She was everything I had dreamed of and more. Our love story was like a novel, filled with joy, laughter, and occasional heartbreak that we always overcame together. We built a life, a family, and memories that I thought would last forever. But life took unexpected turns, changing everything. My daughter visited me today, but it wasn't a pleasant experience for either of us. Despite her kindness, the years of separation and deep wounds made it hard for me to return her affection. She spoke calmly and left without achieving her goal of reconnecting. I promised to consider it, but after she left, I broke down in tears. Megan, now with her own family, still reminds me of the little girl I once held. She's intelligent, articulate, and beautiful, a wonderful wife and mother, much like her mother in both looks and stubbornness. She's everything a parent could hope for. So why haven't I spoken to her until today? It started 5 years ago with her mother's actions. The last words I spoke to Megan were at her mother's funeral. Overcome with emotion, I told her she was as dead to me as her mother. I did the same to my son Stuart and made it clear to everyone present. The shock and pain in their eyes haunt me to this day. I walked away holding the hand of my youngest daughter, Faye. I fell in love with Connie almost instantly. It felt like we had always been together. Our love was perfect, like apple pie and vanilla ice cream. Even before we took our vows, people said we looked like an old married couple. We married after college and had just celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. Our 25th wedding anniversary was a grand celebration on a sunny June day, surrounded by family and friends. My father sat at the head table with Connie's parents and our 3 children. Friends and neighbors congratulated us and showered us with gifts. Even the mayor gave us a sign declaring June 14th as Connie and Mark Jenkins Day. Over 200 people gathered under a big tent, laughing, eating, and dancing late into the night. During our vow renewal, tears flowed freely. I was completely focused on Connie, the woman who completed me and whom I loved deeply. I didn't notice anyone else around us, not even our children or our golden retriever, Bo. Our oldest daughter, Megan, had just returned from her honeymoon. Stuart had finished his 2nd year of university, and Faye her 1st. It was wonderful to have the whole family back home. I secretly missed the chaos of having the kids around, and I think Connie did too. We felt like a complete family again. A few days after the party, I was returning rental equipment when I slightly damaged my truck's fender. At home, I turned too sharply and hit the headlight of a new Lexus. The officer who responded, Greg, had grown up with Stuart and played on his sports teams. Now taller and authoritative in his uniform, Greg made me proud, just like my own children. After finishing the paperwork, Greg and I chatted. Our conversation ended with a comment that planted a seed in my mind, growing like a grass in my thoughts. "Well, Mr. Jenkins," Greg said, extending his hand, "I need to get back to the station. It was nice seeing you again. I'm sorry I missed your anniversary party. My parents said it was great." We shook hands, and I felt proud of the man he'd become. "Oh, and tell Mrs. Jenkins to stop at stop signs from now on," he added with a mischievous grin. "Next time, it won't just be a warning." My confused look must have given me away. "Oops, I didn't mean to say that," he stammered, embarrassed. I tried to ease his discomfort while figuring out what he meant. "It's fine, Greg. Connie doesn't always tell me about her tickets. She thinks I'll get mad and take away her driving privileges. I won't, but I let her think that for some leverage at dinner. What was the ticket for? I might tease her about it." "Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it. It's really no big deal." "Really, it's just friendly teasing. What happened?" "On Saturday the 31st, your wife turned onto Highway 40 from the Holiday Inn without stopping at the sign. She didn't hit anyone, but she accelerated quickly, so I had to pull her over and give her a warning for missing the stop sign." "No damage done? No big deal. Greg, you did the right thing. I'll remind her to watch her driving and tease her a bit. Thanks. It was nice seeing you." After unloading the chairs and tables, I sat in the truck reflecting on my conversation with Greg. On the 31st, I was at my dad's house helping him with chores. It was 2 weeks after Megan's wedding. I remember taking Dad to tour an adult home, though he wasn't interested. I spent all Saturday with him and got home late Sunday. Connie didn't mention the ticket, just said she had a quiet afternoon reading. I dismissed Greg's comment as a mistake since Connie wouldn't lie to me. A month after the party, my sister called saying she found Dad on his kitchen floor. He'd fallen, but wasn't hurt, just confused. I planned to visit that Saturday and convince him to move somewhere with more help. Maybe this time he'd listen, but probably not. He's stubborn. With Stuart and Faye home for the summer, I insisted they come with me, playing the guilt card. You haven't seen Grandpa in a while, and he won't be around forever, I told the kids, and they agreed to go. Connie said she would enjoy the quiet and finish her book. During the ride, Stuart talked about a girl he liked from his philosophy class, and Faye said she planned to finish college without worrying about boyfriends. We discussed their views, leading me to share, yet again, how their mom and I met. Dad was thrilled to see the kids, more excited than I'd seen him in a long time. We ate lunch, talked, and enjoyed the morning. Around noon, he fell asleep, so we split up to let him rest. Hey, watch Grandpa. I'll be right back. I need to get something to take down that dead tree in the backyard, I said. Stuart and Faye watched TV while keeping an eye on him. I intended to get the chainsaw and ropes from home, but ended up turning off the interstate onto Highway 40. At the bottom of the hill, I saw the Holiday Inn entrance and, without thinking, turned into the parking lot. I noticed the stop sign Connie had missed, realizing how easy it was to overlook. As I circled the lot, I saw a car that shouldn't be there. Connie's silver Toyota Camry with her distinctive Conwoman license plate. I got out, looked inside, and saw nothing unusual. The doors were locked. Curious, I called home and got the answering machine. Then I called her cell. "Hi, honey, how are you?" she asked cheerfully. I lied. "Oh, nothing. I was grocery shopping for Dad and decided to call you. I called home, but since you didn't answer, I called your cell. Where are you?" "I'm at the mall. I finished my book and decided to do some shopping. You don't mind, do you?" she replied. Wow, she just lied to me, I thought. "No, just don't spend too much. What time will you be home?" I inquired. "Around 6. Do you want me to make dinner?" she offered. "No, I'm not feeling well. I'll probably stay at Dad's tonight and send the kids home. I'll let you know," I responded. "Okay, call me when you decide," she said sadly. "Did you go to the mall alone?" I questioned. "Yes, by myself. Just got here." "Why?" she asked. "Just wondering." "Have a good time and avoid Greg at the Holiday Inn stop sign tonight," I warned. "Bye," she said. After hanging up, I heard a muffled scream from the hotel's direction but saw nothing. I waited by Connie's car, and a few minutes later, a police car pulled up. Greg got out. "Hello, Mr. Jenkins. Did you call emergency?" Greg asked. "No, I didn't," I replied. "Well, someone reported a car break-in. I better talk to the manager," Greg stated. "Greg, can you do me a favor?" I asked. "Sure, Mr. Jenkins. Anything," he agreed. "Can you check if Mrs. Jenkins is here and who she's with?" "I'll be next door," I requested. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins. I'll find out and come back," Greg assured before driving toward the entrance. After a long wait, I heard sirens, saw an ambulance arrive, and watched them load someone inside. Greg returned, looking sorrowful. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins. Your wife tried to run through a sliding glass door and got hurt. She's at County Hospital, bruised and hysterical. The man with her left when the ambulance did. I have his details, but you'll need to file a form at the station to get them. I'm very sorry." He extended his hand, but I was too stunned to respond. After he left, I broke down in tears. Somehow, I walked back to my dad's house, standing in the driveway, dazed. Faye saw me and ran outside. "What's wrong?" she asked. I couldn't speak, and she started crying when she saw me break down. When Stuart came out, I told them their mom was in the hospital and they should go help her. I didn't explain further, but they quickly got in the car. I tossed the keys to Stuart, saying, "I'm staying here tonight." They looked confused, but drove off. I made sure Dad was okay, then collapsed on the couch, overwhelmed. Dad rolled over and sat next to me. "What's wrong, Mark?" he asked. We rarely discussed closeness matters, so I stayed silent, expecting him to tell me to act like a man. But instead he shared, "After you were born, I stole from work to buy your mom a dress. I got caught, repaid the money, and was put on probation. Your mom was furious and disappointed, hurting our marriage. But one day she found me a job lead, hugged me, and forgave me. From then on, I strive to be a better man for her. Maybe you need forgiveness or to forgive, like she did. I'm proud of you, Mark. I love you very much." He placed his hand on mine and prayed silently before leaving. I stayed on the couch as night fell. I ignored my ringing phone, feeling on the edge. The next morning after making breakfast for Dad, I went into the backyard alone. Around noon, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Hey, Dad, are you okay?" Faye asked, her eyes red and tired. I shook my head no. She hugged me like she did when she was 3, and we both cried. Eventually, she spoke. Dad, Mom's okay physically. She has a concussion, 4 stitches, a broken nose, and bruises. But emotionally, she's a wreck. The doctor gave her something to sleep, but she wakes up screaming your name. Megan and I are with her. Mom keeps asking why you aren't there. She told us what happened, and I confronted her. I told her what she did was unforgivable and that I hated her. Don't say you hate your mother, I interrupted angrily. She loves you and you love her. She made a mistake and I need to figure out what to do. Dad, she cheated and lied to us. She doesn't deserve our love, my child retorted. It doesn't matter, she's your mother, I insisted. But she's also your wife. Do you still love her after what she did? They asked. I was silent for a long time, trying to process everything. I don't know. I'm still in shock. I need time to get my emotions and thoughts under control. Right now, my heart hurts too much to think clearly, I finally replied. Daddy, I'll always support you no matter what you decide. I love you, they said. We hugged and cried, then watched a hummingbird flit between the trees, each lost in our thoughts. I spent the weekend with Dad, talking to Megan and Stuart on the phone, but refused to talk to Connie. I wasn't ready. On Monday, I called work and took a few days off. For the next 3 days, I sat in the backyard, wallowing in my sorrow, with Faye never leaving my side, worried about me. I thought about the 25 years Connie and I had spent together. Things weren't perfect, but the good times far outweighed the bad. I didn't know all the details of what she had done, and I didn't want to. The little I knew was already too much to bear. The lunch Faye brought me lay uneaten next to a roll of paper towels I'd used to wipe my tears. 2 days had passed since my world turned upside down, but my thoughts were no clearer than before. Hey, Mark, a familiar voice jolted me from my thoughts. Without turning, I muttered, Hi, Connie. She sat down across from me, and I could see she looked awful. If I looked half as bad, I might as well be in the morgue. I'm sorry, Mark, she said, staring at her bruised hands. Her face was covered with bandages, bruises, and stitches. She looked terrible, and my broken heart made her seem even uglier. Mark, I came to apologize. I know it's not enough, but it's all I have. Megan drove me because I can't drive myself. I needed to see you, to talk to you about what I did. It was my fault, not yours. You didn't deserve any of it. I hurt myself as much as I hurt you. I might have ruined something more important to me than life itself. I want to explain, she began. No, I don't want to hear it. Knowing what I know is already destroying me inside. Don't say anything more, I interrupted. But Mark, if you understand why I was weak, maybe you'll forgive me. It started, she continued. No, I said I don't want to hear it, I shouted. Please, Mark, we can heal and be a family again. Just listen, she pleaded. I said no, I repeated, standing up and walking away, leaving her sobbing. Daddy, please listen to her, Megan said, catching me in the kitchen. She needs you to listen and forgive her. I turned to Megan and said, if you think listening to her will help, you're more deluded than she is. If she needs to soothe her conscience, let her write a letter. I can't listen to her excuses for ruining our 25-year marriage. I don't have the strength to forgive her right now. I got in my car and drove away, not knowing where I was going or if I would return. When I returned to Dad's the next day, Faye greeted me with a smile and a hug. Her smile reminded me that happiness still existed, giving me a glimmer of hope. But it didn't help me decide if my actions would make anyone else smile. Dad, I've decided to move in with you for a while. I need some time away and you need help with cooking and cleaning. Believe me, Dad, I've tasted your cooking and you need more than just eggs and bacon. Faye added, can you help me get some things from home? I can't go there while Mom's there, and I need work stuff too. Tell everyone I'm living here until I find a permanent solution. Just say Mom and I are separated. No details. Okay, Dad. I'll get your list tonight. Should I tell Mom anything? Just tell her I'm living here and she doesn't need to call. I'll call when I'm ready. I gave Faye my list and discussed our new living arrangements with Dad. He seemed glad I was coming home, but sad about the circumstances. We even played checkers, something we hadn't done in years. He won, of course. When Faye returned with my things, the car was packed. I brought my stuff too, she said firmly. I'll stay in the guest bedroom until school starts. Her determined look showed she was serious. Later, I asked her what happened. Faye's face twisted in anger. Can you believe Megan and Stuart? Megan said you're being childish and should make up with Mom. Stuart said everyone cheats and you should forgive her. and get a girl on the side. They're wrong, Dad. You haven't done anything wrong, but everyone's blaming you. Mom ruined everything and doesn't deserve forgiveness. That's why I'm here. They think you're wrong for not apologizing and going back. I couldn't stand it, so I packed my stuff and left. Faye was on edge, and once her mind was made up, there was no changing it. I let her vent her anger in silence. For the next 2 months, I tried to live normally. I went to work, helped around the house, and taught Faye to make vegetable lasagna. Megan and Stuart called every few days asking when I was coming home. I imagined Connie behind them, waiting for my answer. I told them I was home with Dad and didn't want to talk about or to Connie. When they tried to push, I hung up. One day, Stuart showed up and said he had something important to tell me. We went to the backyard and sat on the patio. He could say what he wanted to say. Dad, you need to come home. It's been 2 months and Mom is worse. I have to go back to school soon and I can't leave Megan alone with her. Mom cries all the time, doesn't sleep or eat, and has lost a lot of weight. Friends are worried too. She just mopes at home and cries when we suggest going out. You've punished her enough. You need to get over this and come home. She's sorry you're hurt and she's hurt. Come home. I looked at my son, remembering the boy I coached and helped become an Eagle Scout, but he had changed. He thought what his mother did was okay, which contradicted the values I tried to instill. No, I thought Stuart was acting irrationally. Stuart, you're a man now, so I'll tell you this man to man. Get out of my house. How dare you accuse me of being immature? I'm not the one who messed up. If you support what your mother did, then you've changed for the worse. Go home and take care of her. I'll be here until I decide otherwise. Now get out before I kick you out. I went inside, and a few minutes later, I heard his car drive off. Faye went back to school in late August. I hadn't heard from Megan or Stuart, so I assumed Stuart was back at school and Megan was managing between her new husband and Connie. They didn't call. It was just Dad and me now. In mid-September, I got a letter from Connie. I tried to read it but had to put it away. My emotions were too strong. I had told Megan that Connie should write a letter to ease her conscience, but now that I had it, I couldn't read it. The wound was still fresh. Instead, I ignored it and moved on with my life. Faye called every couple of days to check on Dad and me. She said Megan and Stuart were taking care of their mother. She planned to come to my birthday party at the end of October and hoped I had decided about my future. Sitting in uncertainty didn't help anyone. I told her we would talk. On October 30th, I turned 50 and made my decision. Faye showed up that morning with plans to take Dad and me out for a big Italian dinner. She wanted to show me what real lasagna tasted like. I smiled, probably for the first time in months. We returned late from the restaurant. After settling Dad into bed, I joined Faye in the living room with a beer. So, Dad, can you tell me what you've decided? Faye asked directly. Sighing, I began, I've decided I don't know everything, including why she did what she did. My stubbornness and refusal to talk won't solve anything. I read her letter, and while I'm not sure I believe everything, I need to give her a chance to explain. Reconciliation seems unlikely, but we need to talk. If I don't believe her, I'll file for divorce. We were both miserable apart. I'll meet with her and see where we stand. I'll call her tomorrow. Faye's phone rang, interrupting me. It's Megan, she said, and stepped outside. She returned 5 minutes later, pale and with wide eyes, and threw herself into my arms, sobbing. Daddy, Mom's dead. Megan found her in the bathroom. It looks like she swallowed a vial of sleeping pills. Megan didn't say anything else. I couldn't comprehend. Connie's dead? Arranging the funeral for the woman I loved for 25 years, the mother of my children who had a lover behind my back, was overwhelming. I tried to appear stoic with the kids, but they knew I was barely holding on. In the evenings, I sat in the backyard, looking at the unused swing, remembering Megan, Stuart, and Faye playing while being chased by their mother. I looked at the azalea bushes Connie and I planted after we moved in, remembering the good times, gatherings, and moments we shared under the stars. Just having her in my life made me feel warm. Now I felt cold and lonely. I had a lot of unresolved feelings, especially about my role in Connie taking the sleeping pills. I didn't put them in her hands, but my refusal to talk to her contributed to her depression. I wanted her to feel my pain because I loved her so much. She did the one thing that could destroy me, and now I may have destroyed her. I never wanted her to die, just to understand my hurt. Now I'll never know. She ruined our marriage, and I ruined hers. We were both wrong. May God have mercy on our souls. Tomorrow is Connie's funeral, my last chance to see her. I needed to control my emotions, face our friends and family, and say goodbye without breaking down. As I heard a car roar down the street, Megan approached me from the back door. "Dad, are you okay?" Megan whispered, settling into a chair across from me. "No, not really." We sat in silence, listening to the rustling leaves. Megan broke the silence. "None of this would have happened if you had come home and forgiven her. She made a mistake. You've probably made mistakes she forgave. She said she couldn't live without you. Your pride liquidated her." Stunned, I sat with my mouth open. My own daughter blamed me for my wife's end of life. I hadn't had an affair or lied to friends and family. I didn't take sleeping pills to ease guilt. Megan continued. "Tomorrow will be tough. Everyone is invited to the house afterward. There will be a lot of people. You don't have to do anything or even be here if you don't want to. Stuart and Mom's friends will help with the food, so you don't have to worry." Megan didn't want me at the funeral. Maybe I was too emotional and stressed to understand her correctly, but I didn't want a confrontation with my daughter before her mother's funeral. I went inside, down to the family room where I slept. The next morning, I dressed in a suit and tie. The kids were already ready in the living room. Faye fixed my tie like her mother used to. Then we walked to the waiting limo, her hand in mine. She was silent, head down. At the funeral home, friends crowded the foyer. They parted as we entered the viewing room, but their expressions confused me. There was no pity, only disdain and contempt. Few made eye contact. I nodded to some, but they turned away. My boss shook my hand and said, "I'm sorry." But others looked at him with contempt. The kids received sympathy, but I was puzzled. I had little funeral experience. This one was nothing like my mother's. Faye and I knelt at the casket. Soft organ music played, but I heard whispers behind us. Unforgiving creep left her. It's because of him. Hypocrite son of a witch liquidated her. Faye squeezed my hand, hearing it too. The preacher's words were soothing, and Connie's friends sang a poignant, non-traditional hymn Connie loved. She shook hands with Megan and Stuart, but said nothing to me or Faye. Several friends spoke, and Megan was the last. She talked about mercy, forgiveness, and how Jesus forgave those who crucified him. Listening to her, I finally understood. When we arrived at the gravesite, a cold wind blew as we listened to the preacher's final words. At the end, he gave each of us a red rose to place on the casket. I went first, followed by Faye, Megan, and Stuart. Dad's old work buddy helped him pass the casket. It was one of the most emotional days of my life. Before we left the grave, I stopped Megan and Stuart. With all the anger I felt, I said, "Megan, Stuart, I know what you did, and I've made a decision. Because of your actions and the way you defended your mother, making me look evil, you are both dead to me, just like the woman we buried. Don't speak to me, come to my house, or socialize with me. I am no longer your father." I then addressed the gathering. That includes all of you. Shocked by my hostility, I took Faye's hand and walked to the limo. We left with my father in his wheelchair, leaving Megan and Stuart behind. Only my boss, his wife, and 2 old friends came to the funeral. They, along with Faye, were all the friends I had left. Megan and Stuart went to her house for comfort. Faye later told me everyone believed I pushed Connie to self-destruction by refusing to forgive her. Faye returned to school, leaving me alone and friendless. When she came home between semesters and during spring break, it brightened my gloomy life. Megan stayed with her husband's family, and Stuart went back to school. I focused on work to cope with the pain. Often, I woke up expecting Connie beside me or tormented by thoughts of her affair with John Jablonski. In her letter, she revealed her lover was an old neighbor who even attended our 25th anniversary party. Over time, the pain became easier to bear. Megan had a baby girl named Connie and later a boy named Chance. I never saw my grandchildren. Stuart married his college sweetheart, but they divorced 2 years later after he cheated, adopting the same behavior he defended in his mother. He moved to California, and I never saw him again after the funeral. Faye keeps me informed about the family, slipping bits of information into conversations because despite everything, they are still my children. My boss became my closest friend, supporting me through tough times and even giving me a year to get back on track, which motivated me to excel. 4 years later, I was promoted to senior manager in Florida. I sold my house, moved to Orlando, and began managing the Eastern U.S. distribution center. I also got another golden retriever for Bo. Now all 3 of us are happy in Maryland. Most of my friends deserted me, leaving me isolated. Faye graduated with honors and landed a management position in Florida, living with me until she finds her own place. Dad died a year after Connie, It's been 5 years since my life changed, and I lost everything except Faye. But even she wants to build her own life. I needed a purpose to avoid becoming a lonely old man with only my dogs for company. I rediscovered my passion for writing, starting with short stories and selling a few to a local magazine. One weekend, I began outlining a story about a difficult time in my life, which turned into much more than a short story. I hesitated, knowing it would dredge up painful memories, but eventually wrote a manuscript over 4 months. I didn't want anyone to read it, so I boxed it up. The writing process itself was cathartic, helping me face and defeat my past demons, allowing me to live again. I enrolled in a creative writing class at the local community college to improve my skills. Most classmates were young and inexperienced, but I found camaraderie with 2 other seniors. Together, we aimed to show the youth of Orange County, Florida, the essence of good writing. Maurice was retired and writing a book about his family's Civil War involvement. Alicia, a widow, was taking courses at the community college to keep her job and find new interests. She had raised 5 children as a stay-at-home mom and moved to Florida after her husband's end of life, using the insurance money to start fresh. Alicia and I found common ground quickly. I listened carefully to her, taking mental notes since I hadn't dated in nearly 30 years. One day she realized she was doing all the talking and asked about my background. I gave her a brief overview, but she pressed for more. Finally, I invited her to dinner at my place to learn my full story. She smiled beautifully and accepted. "Dinner was wonderful, Mark," Alicia said as we stepped onto the patio. "I don't know many men who can make such delicious vegetable lasagna. What other surprises do you have?" "I think you know most of it. I run the Folks Industries distribution center. My daughter Faye lives with me. My wife died over 5 years ago. I have 2 other children, and you've met my Goldens, Bo and Luke. That's me in a nutshell. Boring," I replied. "You promised to tell me your story if I came to dinner, so I'm waiting," she prompted. Instead of speaking, I brought out a box with my novel, a story about the biggest events in my life. I've been writing for years and sold a few short stories. This novel is about me and my family. Writing helped me process the pain from my wife's end of life and my family breaking up. "I haven't shown it to anyone and would love your opinion," I explained. She looked at me with admiration. "I would love to read your book." "What's it called?" she asked. "Fair Weather Friends," I answered. "Wow, it's heavy," she said, taking the book. "It's 987 pages. I want your honest opinion." "I haven't shown it to my daughter because it would bring up old feelings," I admitted. "Mark, I'd love to read it and give you my opinion. I'm very particular and tell it like it is." "I'll start tomorrow," she assured me. We talked about writing classes, Florida nightlife for people our age, and ended up sharing opinions on some of our favorite movies. We had a nice evening, and for once, the Florida weather improved. As I walked her to her car, she kissed me on the cheek. I felt like a teenager again as I cleaned up after our little dinner. Alicia wasn't in class for the next meeting, and I hadn't heard from her since our dinner. I began to wonder if she read my book and thought I was some kind of freak to be avoided. I considered calling her but didn't want to seem intrusive. 2 weeks later, she called when I wasn't home and left a message on my answering machine. "Hi, Mark, it's Alicia. I want you to come to my house for dinner Friday night. My son is in town and staying with me for a few days, and I want you to meet him. I may have a little surprise for you when you get here, so bring a bottle or 2 of that fine white wine we had the other day and be here at 7. Call me back and let me know. Bye." Friday night, I dressed casually but nicely and brought 2 bottles of 2012 Balthazar Cabernet Hattenheimer Schützenhaus. I had read in a local Orlando magazine that it was one of the best white wines of the year, and since I knew nothing about wines, I decided to trust the article's author. It paired well with the lasagna, and I hoped it would pair well with whatever Alicia was serving. "Hi, Mark. Come on in." Alicia's face lit up as she gave me a tour of her house. When we stepped out onto the patio, I saw a small table set for 3 with candles and wine glasses. A man appeared between 2 orange trees in the light of the dining table. "Mark, I'd like you to meet my son, Barry. Barry, this is Mark Jenkins." "It's a pleasure to meet you," he said, shaking our hands. "Mom has told me a lot of good things about you. She's impressed, and it takes a lot to impress her." "It's nice to meet you too, Barry, but everything she said is probably a fabrication from our creative writing class. There's not much interesting about me." Alicia smiled and pointed to the table. She took the bottles of wine and put them in the refrigerator while we sat down. When she finally sat, she smiled her beautiful smile again and took my hand. "Mark, I invited you here under false pretenses. We'll eat once the wine has cooled. But first, I want to talk and tell you what I think is amazing news. I think it will be a surprise to you. Hopefully a good one. My curiosity was piqued, but at the same time, I was more than a little nervous. Mark, my son came here today to meet you because I did something you probably wouldn't have approved of if I had asked you beforehand. But I did it, and now it's too late. So if you're going to be mad, just go ahead and be mad. Okay, here's what I did. I finished your book in 2 days, and it blew me away. I couldn't tear myself away from it once I got about halfway through. It was the most inspiring and heartbreaking story I have ever read. I cried at the end of the chapter where you go to live with your father after finding out about your wife. I cried at the end when you talk about your children. Mark, this was the most fantastic book I have ever read, and I had to share it with my son. I sent it to him and he read it. He doesn't usually read unsolicited books by unknown authors, but at my request he did. He is my son and he had no choice. Mark, he liked it too and wants to help you edit the book so we can publish it later. Isn't that fantastic? I just sat there looking at her, and she smiled back at me. I didn't know what to say or do. I probably looked pretty stupid, but I couldn't help it. When I shifted my gaze to Barry, he smiled back and continued where his mother had left off. Mom's right, Mr. Jenkins. This is the best first novel I've ever read, and I've read quite a few. You see, I work at Prentice Press in New York, and I'm the assistant managing editor in charge of screening submissions from authors like you. We get about 100 new books a month, and I have to read and evaluate them before sending them to 2 other reviewers. If we all agree that what we read is worthy of publication, we work with the author to have their manuscript edited and prepared for publication. Your book has gone through this process, and we want to publish it. We can discuss the details after dinner, but for now, I want to congratulate you on creating such a moving book. It will be a real winner. I was dumbfounded. I'm sure now that the expression on my face went from stupid to idiotic in the blink of an eye. Alicia's smile increased tenfold as she watched me sit there with an idiotic expression, not knowing what to say. Finally, she stood up, kissed me on the forehead, and went to get dinner. While making the salad, I regained the power of speech. We talked about my book and its parts. I saw Alicia tear up as we talked about certain parts, and I know I did too. We ate Alicia's version of mahi-mahi and talked some more. While enjoying sweet peach cobbler, Barry outlined the process and the work I needed to do. He talked about promoting the book and what royalties I could expect. I wasn't going to get rich. By the time he drifted off to sleep, my head was spinning with everything I'd just learned. Alicia poured the last of the wine, and we sat together in the cool night breeze, discussing what it was like to be a famous author like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. I wasn't in their league, but it was fun to fantasize. It was past midnight when I came back to reality and decided it was time to head home. Alicia walked me to my car, and this time she gave me a deep kiss that touched my very soul. It reminded me that I may be 55 years old, but I wasn't dead yet. I hadn't felt anything like that since Connie, and the thought made me sad. For the next 3 months, I worked with an editor at Prentice Press, revising and polishing my manuscript. We had one face-to-face meeting and many emails and phone calls. The first thing I had to do was transfer my MS Word version into the software they recommended. I found it easy to use for editing, but cumbersome for creating new pieces from scratch. When we were both satisfied with the final product, a printed sheet arrived via FedEx overnight mail, and I spent the entire weekend going through it sentence by sentence, word by word. No matter how many times I reread it, I always found something to change for the better. My editor warned me it would be this way, and she turned out to be right. I worked all day at Fox Industries and all evening on my novel. Faye was absolutely thrilled with my book. I told her she couldn't read it until I got the first copy from the publisher. She made sure I ate, exercised, and watched the evening news before bed, acting like an old mother hen. Alicia, on the other hand, only came over on weekends. She said she didn't want to deprive me of my creative energies. We'd go out to dinner or I'd cook something at home. We talked about everything. Nothing was off limits. No expensive psychiatrist could have done more for me than she did. The more I talked about my past, the better I felt. Apparently, I had never gotten over what Connie had done to me and what I had done to her. I now realized we were both to blame, and each of us was in our own story. Our friendship grew stronger, and the day I sent Prentice my latest changes to the galleys, she said she was going to reward me. When I finished, she stayed the night, and we rewarded each other repeatedly. Faye came home for a few minutes, and when she realized I had company, she went back out to stay with her boyfriend. Alicia opened up a new appreciation of life in me. My book appeared in stores on May 1st. I was contractually obligated to do several in-person signing sessions around the country, one of which was in Ellicott City, my old hometown in Maryland. I was both alarmed and terrified by the event. I took 3 weeks of vacation and went on a book tour. One might imagine the life of an author as glamorous and uncomplicated, but it wasn't at all for 28 days straight. My routine consisted of flying or taking the train to a new city, checking into a hotel without unpacking because I wasn't going to stay there long, going to a book signing and talking to everyone in a long line of well-wishers and fans about how my book had changed their lives. I really enjoyed chatting with everyone at the book signings, but the travel and hotels got boring quickly. Alicia showed up unannounced to have me sign her book in 2 cities, replacing my book signing tour routine with absolute joy. She acted shy and demure, and I played the world-famous author seducing a local woman. She stayed the night and helped me stretch out all the aches and pains that air travel can cause. Every time she left, I felt a void in myself where she used to be. We talked on the phone, but it wasn't the same as holding her in my arms. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years, something only someone in love can understand. I hoped she felt the same way. The last stop on my tour was my old hometown. I'd asked if it could be the last one, and Prentice was very gracious. I knew the bookstore well, for it was only a few miles from my old home. The event was to begin at noon and last until 4 o'clock. When I arrived at the store, there was already a long line of people waiting in front of a table with about 50 copies of my book, neatly laid out along with a large poster with my picture on the cover and an announcement of the book signing time. I looked around and saw a few people in line that I remembered. First in line were my former boss and his wife. I immediately went over to them, gave them both a hug, and then got a signal to sit down and start signing books. We exchanged phone numbers, addresses, and email addresses, and I promised to come back and take them both out to dinner. I was so happy to see them that I almost forgot about the growing line behind them. I signed books, chatted with them, and smiled at everyone in line. A couple of times I got up to take a picture with someone. Overall, it was a much better experience than I expected. About 30 minutes in, one of my old friends came up to me and held out my book. He was one of those people at Connie's funeral who wouldn't look me in the eye or talk to me. I signed the book to my old friend, smiled, and gave him a friendly handshake. Then he did something I didn't expect. He said in a very quiet voice, "I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I didn't realize until I read your book." He shamefully turned and walked away. Similar apologies came from several of my former friends throughout the day. People I once called friends apologized for the way they treated or judged me. I was almost embarrassed when they left. The most surreal moment occurred when Lenore Jablonski approached the table with a copy of my book to autograph. She approached with an awkward grin. "Hi, Mark. I'm sorry to see you again after everything that's happened, but I thought I should meet you and sympathize a little. I can't apologize for what John did to you, but if it makes any difference, you should know that I kicked that son of a witch out shortly after Connie died. We've been divorced for 4 years, and I'm engaged to a contractor from Annapolis. And just in case you heard anything, there was a rumor going around town that you were looking for John to get a little revenge for the pain he caused. He must have heard that, because one day he quit his job and took a position in Saudi Arabia as a computer consultant. I haven't seen him since. Oh, and yes, I'm the one who started the rumor." She stood in front of the desk, smiling and holding out the book. I didn't know what to do or say. After a moment of silence where we just looked at each other, I took the book and signed, "To Lenore, no fair weather friend. I hope that some of the words in my book will help you find your deliverance as I have found mine. Thanks for listening, Mark." I walked around the table and we hugged for a moment before she left. By the end of the appointed time, there was still a line in front of the table. I looked up and was stunned. Megan was standing by one of the book racks, watching what was going on. She didn't come over or say anything, and she had a rather subdued look. When I looked up while signing the next book, she was gone. I got up and looked around, but she was already gone. Last in line was Faye. We hugged and made small talk as she walked me to her car. She drove me back to my hotel, and no, it wasn't a Holiday Inn. We sat in the car for a long time talking about Alicia. Faye liked her and hoped I did too. When I told her I thought I was in love with Alicia, she put her arms around me and sobbed on my neck. Luckily, just as she was hugging me, a police car appeared nearby and flashed its headlights. Police Sergeant Greg got out of the car and tapped on the window as we all got to know each other. It was like a mini reunion. We talked, laughed, hugged, and I told him what I was doing in town. He hadn't read my book, so I pulled out one of my stockpile and signed it for him on the cover. To Greg, meeting you changed my life. No offense. Someone had to do it, Mark. Greg had to go off on business, and Faye and I went to the house and had dinner. All in all, going back to where it all started wasn't as traumatic as I had expected. It was a big shock to see Megan on the other side of my door. Alicia and I had just finished breakfast and were discussing the latest New York Times bestseller list, and the fact that Friends in the Weather was ranked third in the nonfiction category. But all that faded into the background when I saw my daughter. "Hi, Daddy. How are you?" asked Megan with a note of embarrassment in her voice. "Hi, Megan. I'm fine. What can I do for you?" I replied. "I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop to see how you were doing," she said. "This neighborhood is 900 miles from yours, Megan. A little out of the way, isn't it?" I responded. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Alicia standing there. "Would you like to introduce me, Mark?" she said with a commanding note in her voice. "Alicia, this is my daughter Megan," I introduced. Alicia squeezed past me and hugged Megan tightly. "Come on in. I've heard so much about you." The two women completely ignored me as they made their way into the living room. They sat down at the table and talked nonstop for an hour, leaving me to clean the kitchen and take care of other household chores that needed to be done. I only passed by the living room a couple of times during the cleaning, and they chatted and giggled the whole time. Alicia oohed and awed when Megan showed her pictures of her kids. "Honey, come out here and join us," Alicia called out. I immediately knew I needed to follow orders, so I came out and sat down next to her. She grabbed my hand more to keep me from leaving than as a sign of affection. Megan stared at our intertwined fingers. Everyone was silent for longer than seemed comfortable. "Okay, since neither of you want to speak, I'll do it," Alicia said sternly. "Mark, I invited Megan here because she wants to tell you something. I knew you wouldn't invite her, so I did. I know I'm just a guest in your house, but if you want me to continue being a guest, you're going to sit here and listen to her." My gaze darted between Megan and Alicia. They had me cornered, and I didn't want to start another argument. So I sat back and prepared myself. "Dad, I came to see how you're doing. And that's no lie, I also came to apologize. Dad, I was wrong about many things, especially about you. I thought everything that happened to Mom, Stuart, and me was your fault. I only saw part of what happened back then. It wasn't until I read your book that I saw everything from your point of view. I felt so foolish after reading what you wrote and realizing how hurt you were. I guess I never thought you had feelings because you barely expressed them when we were little. Your book helped me grow up. I never realized that, though I'm a grown woman with a husband and children, I was still an innocent little girl to you. I always thought Mom was a saint, even after the horrible things she did to you. You always seemed strong and confident, unaffected by anything. But I see now that it was a facade. You used it to protect your feelings. Mom broke through that shield and hurt you more than I could have imagined. I believed that if you had been strong and forgiven her, everything would have been okay. I didn't realize you were strong. So strong that you stepped away from the one you loved for over 25 years to protect all of us from her mistake. Dad, I'm sorry for not giving you your due. Instead, I abandoned you and told everyone it was your fault. After Mom died, I told people she died because of what you did. I was wrong and I realize it now. I've started to correct my mistakes. I bought many copies of your book and gave them to all your and Mom's old friends, asking them to read it. I told them you did nothing wrong and were hurt more than anyone could imagine. I saw you at a book launch a few weeks ago and watched you. I wanted to come over and hug you, but I didn't have the courage. Today, I'm here to apologize and ask you to be part of my life again. It's been over 5 years now. You have 2 beautiful grandchildren you've never seen. I want you to come home. I want you to be my father again. I don't want to be dead to you anymore. I love you, Daddy, and I need you to love me again. Please." Megan put her head down and began to cry. At that moment, I felt a prick of guilt. I glanced at Alicia, who was looking at me, waiting to see what I would do. I pondered Megan's words and how I should respond. As I deliberated, I decided to stall. "What about Stuart?" I asked Megan. "How does he feel about me? Did he know you were coming here?" "Stuart is such a prick. I think what Mom did hurt him the most. After Lori caught him cheating and divorced him, he moved to California and started living wildly. He's been bouncing from one girlfriend to another. I heard he was dating a married woman whose husband was opposed to their relationship. So Stuart left town to avoid consequences. He still thinks everyone cheats and it's okay. He doesn't know I'm here and I don't care what he thinks. Her tirade didn't give me enough time to think about my response, so I decided to delay again. Megan, what are your plans now? Are you staying in town? Do you have a place to stay? I'm staying at Faye's. She wanted me to see her new apartment, so I'm staying there for a couple of days before heading home. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll think about everything you said today and let you know what I decide. That's the best I can do right now. Dad, honestly, I didn't even expect this much. Thank you. I'm going to see Faye now, Alicia. It was nice to finally meet you. I hope to see you again soon. Take care of my dad for me. Megan left as suddenly as she had appeared. I had a lot to think about, but this time I had a guide who wouldn't let me do anything stupid. Alicia was a part of me now, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. When I was alone with Alicia, I let my emotions run wild. I didn't want her to see me cry. When Alicia and I returned from our Caribbean cruise, we flew straight to Maryland. The cruise was a gift from Prentice Press because the book, Friends in the Weather, had hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. I met my 2 grandchildren, who are now 2 and 4 years old, and showed Alicia around town. There were many memories in the old place, and Megan and I began to make new ones as father and daughter. Alicia, with her grandparenting experience, gave me valuable advice to help me through the awkward moments. But the best moment came at dinner with Megan's family when I announced that Alicia and I had decided to get married. We made this decision during the cruise and wanted to let Megan know in person. Faye had already started planning the wedding. We were also going to visit Alicia's children to share the news. Alicia and I are very happy. We both said that when we were young, we never would have thought our lives would turn out this way. In our youthful naivety, we believed we were invincible and that our first true love would be our only love. But life didn't turn out like a fairy tale. It unfolded like millions of other real stories. I was happy with Connie for 25 years, and I expect to be just as happy with Alicia for the next 25 years. Maybe I'll write another book about it. Grow old with me. The best is yet to come, the last life for which the first was created. Our times are in his hand. Who says I have conceived the whole youth shows only half? Trust God, see the whole. Fear not heck. Robert Browning was smart.